You're listening to the Turn Autism Around podcast, episode number 169. Today, I'm giving you a very quick summary of 3 reasons why we should not be using timeout or punishment or even threats of punishment with kids with autism, toddlers with signs or diagnosis of autism, ADHD, or speech delays. This is a little summary, actually, of a mini course I just created, and it is available for purchase at a very, very low price. And I'm really proud of it. It really breaks down just the need to knows, and we are going to give contact hours and 2 BACB CEUs as well for those of you that are in the ABA field. So this podcast is just 3 reasons why we should not be using timeout. And even if you're not using timeout, you probably are using some punishers or threats of punishment, whether you're a parent or professional. I think it's an important listen. So hope you enjoy this quick episode called No More Timeout or Punishment, 3 reasons we should be avoiding both. Welcome back to another episode of the Turn Autism Around podcast. I am thrilled that you're here. Today, we are talking all about why timeout and punishment and even threats of punishment should not be used really for any child. And this is all based on the fact that I just created a mini course called No More Timeout. And it is for parents and professionals, mostly working with young children, ages 1 to 5, with signs of or diagnoses of autism, ADHD, or speech delay. This was really meant as a training for lay people and for early intervention practitioners to really look at a much more positive approach. So you can get all the details. We are going to include 2 BACB CEUs. So even if you are a seasoned behavior analyst, if you want to get training for at a very, very low cost, you can just go to nomoretimeout.com, and that will take you to the page where we'll explain all about that course. But since this is a free podcast, I just want to go over 3 reasons why I believe that timeout in almost every case can be eliminated and not used. I have seen timeout be one of the most overused and incorrectly used strategies in the whole world in terms of parenting and just even schools and residential placements. And I've seen it being very, very widely used still. So let's just, now that you know how to get to the mini course, which is really going to go into much more details, we're going to show you some videos and really talk through some positive strategies there. I'm just going to give you a synopsis of the basics of that mini course. So if you think about discipline, and I looked up discipline for this podcast, also for another blog I did years ago, but discipline means training people, which is good, training people. We should really leave discipline out, like totally just training people. But the definition in the dictionary goes on to say that discipline is training people to obey rules or a code of behavior. So that's still okay. Discipline meaning training people to obey rules or a code of behavior. But then it also adds using punishment to correct disobedience. And for everybody out there, especially for behavior analysts who have studied this, is that we know that a positive reinforcement and having positive environments will lead to better outcomes than relying on punishment to there's a great book out named called Coercion and Its Fallout by Dr. Sid Murray. And that's an awesome book. I wish I had it here to hold it up. But it basically says that all of our institutions over the past decades have relied on a very punishing system. If you think about schools in general, there's the clip system of you're all on green. Oh, now Johnny's on yellow and red, and now he's got to go to the principal's office, and you're going to lose your recess. All of those potential punishers, are in place, both for large-scale classroom management as well as for individuals. If you think about the criminal justice system, it's very much a punishing, aversive system. Again, though, we all humans, and actually all animals, learn best. Absolutely, studies have absolutely proven this, that all animals, including humans, learn best with a positive reinforcement system. So that all that punishment, I know, when I was a kid, even in Catholic school, some of the boys would get hit. It's very common for parents to spank their children, or for there to be grounding and punishers going all the time for every family. So I did do a podcast interview with Amy Sutherland, who wrote the book, What Shamu Taught Me About Life, Love, and Marriage, or some combination like that. We can link that in the show notes. It's a great episode with Amy Sutherland, who really explains how all animals learn best with positive reinforcement. And some of that leftover things like timeout are really not the best way to manage behavior in situations involving kids with autism, or any typically developing kid or typical adult even. And I do also want to say I want to talk a little bit about threats. So you might think, well, I don't use timeout, or I don't really follow through with actual punishment procedures like that. But a lot of our institutions and a lot of our families are involving a lot of threats. So if Johnny won't clean up his toys, you told him to clean up and, get a bath or whatever. If he's not cleaning up his toys, you could start threatening. Well, if you don't clean up your toys, we're not going to go to a restaurant or a park, or we're not, some people even say, like, we're not going to go to Disney next fall. And like those kind of threats, you get to a party and there's some misbehavior, and then we're going to leave, even though you and the child know that you're not leaving. And so threats of punishment or actual punishment all go hand in hand. And I did a podcast interview with the 3 podcast hosts from ABA Inside Track, and we talked about the very important work of Dr. Glenn Latham, and he wrote 2 books, which we talk about on this podcast. We can link it in the show notes. The 2 books are Positive Parenting, The Power of Positive Parenting, and Behind the Schoolhouse Door, 8 Skills Every Teacher Needs. That second book is available for free download. We can link that in the show notes as well. So we need to turn the tables on punishers, including timeout. And I also want to say that timeout is not always a punisher. So a punisher means that the behavior that you're treating with timeout, we're going to talk about that too, If timeout is actually a punisher, that behavior, that biting, the hitting, the swearing, whatever you're putting your child or clients in timeout about, should be going down. And in a lot of cases, timeout backfires, and it is actually serving as a reinforcer. I've done a lot of video blogs and podcasts on problem behavior. I did blogs on biting, for instance, and hitting. I've done podcasts. Actually, I think the number one downloaded podcast is a problem behavior podcast. We can link those in the show notes as well. And we're not really going to get heavily, I don't even think we're going to cover the functions of behavior. If we do, it's going to be a very light covering of that. But I also have a podcast or two on the functions of behavior and how it is complicated. And a lot of times we have what is known as a mixed function. So before I go on and tell you the 3 reasons you should not be using timeout, let's talk about what timeout is. So timeout is when you have a problem behavior of some sort and you remove the child or verbally tell the child to move to another area of the room, to a special naughty chair, to a special desk, to a it might not be called to their bedroom. It might not be called a timeout area. It might be called a calm down area. It might be called a sensory room, but you have problem behaviors and the child is taken to or sent to a room that is not supposed to be reinforcing. So I did do a video blog on sensory rooms, and that is one very inappropriate way to use a sensory room, is to send them there for punishment, which I'm not going to agree with, but it turns into a really bad cycle of treating behavior with how I call willy-nilly, quote unquote. So the child has a problem behavior, is taken or sent to a different area of the room or a different part of the house or school for a period of time. But that doesn't always work. A lot of times there's no timer set. And then some experts who have created timeout decades ago recommend a minute per age. So for a 2-year-old, you'd send them there for a timed amount of 2 minutes. For an 8-year-old, they would get 8-minute timeout. They could go to the step, a staircase. There's so many problems with this. And I do get a lot more into the problems with timeout in the No More Timeout mini course. But, it could be that you told your child to do something and they don't want to do it. I have an example where, I was in a classroom setting years ago and I walked in and I'm like, "Where's Johnny?" And they said, "Oh, he's in," I think it was a sensory room, to calm down. I'm like, "Oh, okay. What's he calming down about?" Well, we had him do a math sheet, double-digit addition. I think they just said a math sheet. And I said, "Well, what kind of math?" And they said double-digit addition. And he swiped the materials or overturned the desks or yelled. I don't know what exactly he did. I can't remember, but that prompted them to send him to the calm down area. And I said I wasn't going to get into functions, but he basically was escaping a hard task, right? And then he got to go and calm down, which for escape-related behaviors, actually timeout, totally based on science, based on all the literature we know, timeout is contraindicated. It is not indicated, not appropriate for escape-related behavior. So I said, well, he escaped and now he's getting reinforcement. And they said, "Oh, no, he's not getting reinforcement because when he gets out of the calm down area, we're going to make him do that math again." But any delay help or getting rid of the work is reinforcing. And I am not here to say that Johnny should have been kept the demand on using escape extinction. I am very much against escape extinction for many of the same reasons that I'm against timeout. And we can link in the show notes a really good podcast interview. We might even have two with Dr. Megan Miller, who is on a crusade really to have behavior analysts stop using keep the demand on situation. And the whole problem with Johnny and his math sheet and his calm down area is that Johnny wasn't fluent with single digit addition. So if you are having major problem behaviors, then the demands are most likely too high, which means the child doesn't have needed prerequisite skills. So demands are too high and or reinforcement is too low. I have used timeouts in the past. I've used timeout a few times for my typically developing son, Spencer, but that was before I was behavior analyst. I've also used timeout a few times, probably more than a few times with clients. But I haven't used timeout, and I don't recommend timeout for over 5 years now, because it almost always backfires. And unless you have a very positive, structured program in place, and you have a very seasoned behavior analyst there with you while you're using timeout, it's probably going to backfire and just not reduce any problem behaviors. Instead, it's going to increase problem behaviors. So let's get to the 3 reasons why we should not be using timeout. As I said, all humans and animals learn best in the absence of punishment. If you think of dog training, for instance, or dolphin training, I mean, with a dolphin, it's not going to work to put them in a cage and punish them for not jumping up and hitting the cue or whatever you call it at the top, the mark. We have to use a positive approach. And many dog trainers are still using punishment and negative approaches. But as I said, Amy Sutherland, which we're going to link in the show notes here. Anything I say, we're going to link in the show notes. This is going to be episode number 169. Can't believe that we're that far along. So anything, if you want to look at the links that I'm mentioning, just go to marybarbera.com/169. And if you're out exercising or in a car and you can't remember, you can always search Mary Autism plus whatever topic, no more timeout, for instance, or potty or sleep or eating or talking. I have lots of free resources and now more paid resources to find out, to find the episode, to find the mini course. And you might, maybe I'll talk about this for 1 second while we're still at point number 1. You might think, well, there is so much free information about this, and you're providing this free. Why would I pay for the mini course, or why would I pay for your full toddler course or your full verbal behavior bundle? And it's a good question. You can certainly keep watching, keep listening, read my books, download my blogs. But I've been at this for more than 2 decades, and I've been in the online marketing space since 2015. So over 7 years now. And I can tell you that if you don't pay for information to be curated and broken down and given to you all in one chunk. In the mini course, it's less than 2 hours. The toddler course is about 10 hours. The BB bundle is 32 hours and more than that. But it's all broken down. So you don't have to just spend your time consuming free content that is on a variety of topics, variety of ages. I learned so much from online courses. I learned how to play the piano in 21 days, but it actually took a lot longer than 21 days. But I was committed for 21 days. I've joined weight loss programs where it's 6 weeks or 10 weeks, or exercise programs that are, 2 months or 3 months in length for like a boot camp or something like that. I've taken a podcast, how to do a podcast course with Pat Flynn, and I was able to consume that in really a week. I set out a schedule and I consumed it and I started the podcast. So yes, can you learn how to play the piano online for free? Yes. But very few people can commit to something like that and really get all the rationale, see the videos, get a plan. So I'm not sure exactly how I got on that soapbox, but the number one reason you should not be using timeout or punishment is because we all, even animals, dolphins, dogs, and all humans learn best with a positive approach. It is never okay for physical spanking, even though decades ago when I was a kid, it wasn't a big deal. It's never okay for spanking or hitting a child back, or and then threats and timeout and all of those things are really aversive. It can cause kids, like even if you have typically developing kids and you use threats and punishment and you're grounded, and if I hear that one more time, and the typical kids will start to just lie. They'll sneak around and do things if you freak out and ground them as soon as they do, something wrong. So having a positive approach is really key. So what can you do instead of using punishment is Glenn Latham's formula, using 8 positives to every negative across the board with your spouse, with your coworkers, with your clients, with your kids. And when you're creating, if you're a professional, if you're creating a clinic or a school or your classroom for the year, or if you are selecting a classroom, a school, a building, a program at home, if you're selecting or creating a program, make sure that you're creating a positive environment that includes a positives to every negative to everyone in the room. And then learning as much as you can about how to create the positive environment and keep it positive. It's more, that bar is constantly being raised and needs to be high so that we don't just create a positive program or approach, we actually continue it, even if we get some new problem behaviors, some more alarming problem behaviors. And even as kids get older, it's more important than ever not to be punitive. The bigger they get, the more they could hurt themselves, others, they could hurt the environment. If you put them in their room for timeout, for instance, they could destroy the environment. They could, God forbid, put their head through the window. All kinds of things can happen, especially as a child ages. And which is one of the other reasons that the No More Timeout course is really made for kids ages 1 to 5 and the parents and professionals who work with them. Same principles happen all along, but the earlier we can start putting these positive preventative strategies in place, the better. Okay, so the number 2 reason we should not be using timeout or punishment for our children with autism or younger children with signs of autism, ADHD, or speech delays is that because they are delayed, it's even more reason not to use timeout and punishment. If you don't understand the language and you have cognitive abilities that are not up to where they need to be, you are not going to be able to understand the rules, understand the language, to understand the rules. Remember, my definition of discipline, which I got online, is training people to obey the rules or code of behavior. If you have a 4-year-old who's functioning at a 2-year-old level, you're not going to be able to just put that 4-year-old child in a 4-year-old preschool class. They're functioning like a 2-year-old. They don't know how to share. They don't know how to stand in line for 5 minutes. They don't know what you mean by get out your red folder and go sit on the carpet square and don't talk to your neighbor and sit crisscross applesauce. All of those norms and rules, it'd be like me being in a foreign country and not knowing the language and not knowing any language, and all of this language coming out and being presented. So we really have to consider, especially kids with delays, we need to handhold more. We need to coddle them more. We need to prompt them more. We need to protect them more from environments that are going to have high expectations. I remember when Lucas was really little, before he was diagnosed with autism, or maybe right when he was diagnosed, I was like, I can't imagine Lucas growing up in a household where there was abuse, because you'd be like, put your cup on the table and he would just ignore you, throw the cup. Like, he didn't understand the language. So if you have punishers and abusive people around your child, they're going to have their expectations way too high. So what can you do instead for point number 2, or reason number 2 you shouldn't use timeout? You're going to want to make sure that for each child, each client that you work with, or for your own child, make sure that you do the 1-page assessment and the 1-page plan. You can get that all by reading my book, Turn Autism Around, but you can also, we walk you through and we give you videos of exactly how to fill out the 1-page assessment and plan in the No More Timeout mini course. You can also just jump right into our full courses, where the mini courses will be available at no additional cost. Okay, so get all the information at nomoretimeout.com for the mini course. Okay, and the third reason that we should not be using timeout for our kids is most problem behavior occurs, like I said, because the demands are too high and/or reinforcement's too low, and the child usually doesn't have the prerequisites or the language to understand the skills that you're going after. And a lot of times, for those of you that do know about functions of behavior, a lot of times it is a mixed function. And so timeout is actually contraindicated for at least part of the reason that they are having problem behaviors. So it's by nature going to backfire. And a lot of people who are using timeout, especially in like preschools and typically developing situations, in a daycare situation, if they're using timeout, they're probably not using it. I tell a story in the mini course where, all of a sudden a new client that I was just observing for the very first time, he ended up in timeout. And I was like, what did he do? And I asked the teacher later, and she's like, we just put him in timeout when we've had enough. And I'm like, well, when does he get out of timeout? Well, when we're ready for him. And so a lot of times, in addition to the demands are too high, reinforcement's too low, it's contraindicated. A lot of times, timeout is also not used in any kind of way to know. You don't know if it's going to work because you don't even know if you are using timeout or plan to use timeout. It's got to be if he says this or if he does this. If he bites, then he goes to timeout. If he swears, he goes to timeout. And then you also have to know how long timeout is going to be. And then you have to keep data so that you know that 5-minute timeout is reducing the biting or whatever's going to lead to timeout. So it's so complicated that it really has no chance of working unless you're doing it with a lot of fidelity, and that just never happens in regular classrooms, in daycares, preschools, at homes. But even if you are working in a residential treatment or an ABA school, I still would challenge you to say that there are better, more positive ways. And if you take my full courses, you will definitely learn the ways where you can eventually eliminate timeout for almost all of your clients. Okay, so what should we do instead? We need to focus 95% of our time preventing problem behaviors and teaching prerequisite skills based on the one-page assessment and the one-page plan that are in my book, in my mini course, and my full courses. We really need to learn how to prevent and undo problem behavior without punishment. So in summary, we need to stop using timeout and punishment. I know I feel like I've said that a zillion times now, but it is being overused and incorrectly used in so many situations. We want to get get 8 positives to every negative in place. We want to create and select environments that are positive, not punishing. We want to complete the one-page assessment and one-page plan, which is part of the Turn Autism Around approach. And if a child has language abilities of a much younger child, then our expectations have to be different. And that child may need a different environment. They may need more one-to-one support, and they probably need a lot more denser reinforcement than they are getting. And this is not about just helping children with autism or toddlers showing signs. This is about being positive and making our institutions, the education system, the criminal justice system, your workplaces, a positive environment as much as possible. So the more we can learn, the better that we'll do. So I hope you enjoyed this. I would really urge you to go check out the page for nomoretimeout.com to think about taking that course. Is only an hour and a half, 2 hours long, and it will most likely really change the way you think about behavior and language and creating a positive environment. So thanks so much for joining me today. I'll see you next week for another episode of Turn Autism Around. Next time, we have a very special guest. Kate Swenson from Finding Cooper's Voice is coming back on the show to talk about her new book. And I'm super excited to share that with you as well. Thanks so much.